Hi, my name is Kristen Dalton. I am on staff with Greek IV at Indiana University, and I just got to watch 100 students say yes to an invitation to follow Jesus. Welcome to InterVarsity World Changers.
Alumni, you're in for a real treat today. Yes, we're going to hear about this unprecedented moment with Greek IV students at IU, but that's just one part of a much bigger story that God's been telling throughout Kristen's life. Back to her own time as a Greek IV student, as a Greek staff for the first time, as a mom, as a discipler of people learning to follow Jesus, and very recently as a Greek staff for the second time. Whether celebrating or mourning, whether her calling felt clear or cloudy, God has been faithfully doing his world-changing work with and through Kristen. It's going to be a great ride. I'm so glad that you're here for it. This is InterVarsity World Changers, and here's Kristen's story. Kristen, welcome to InterVarsity World Changers.
Thanks, John. It's so good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. I mean, when I heard your story, I was like, this is somebody that I'm pretty excited to talk about. And I'm excited to hear your story. I'm excited that you're an InterVarsity alumna and that you've gotten to partner with God in some really cool ways, not just in the story that you mentioned. I know that there's a lot more to it than just that. But certainly the story that you're going to tell us today. And I'm just excited to hear more about how God's at work in you and in your context. Kristen, as you mentioned in the intro that people have already heard, you're on staff with Greek IV at Indiana University. How long have you been on staff? Give us just a little bit of an idea of what your role is there.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I was on staff for 12 years with Greek IV from 1998 to 2010. And now I am back. I just came back on staff last July, so it'll be 1 year in July again. Yes.
Okay. And it has been quite a first year back, it sounds like.
Totally.
And, so, I mean, we'll get into the story in more depth, but like, Kristen, can you just give us a synopsis here of what it is that happened on campus and whether or not this has been a typical experience for you in your staff career?
No, totally not anything that I had ever experienced. My husband, Andy, has been volunteering. I've also been doing some work with Paul Birch, who's been helping out. He's been on staff for 40 years with InterVarsity.
Yeah, wow.
And all of us are like, no, we have never seen anything like this. God has totally done the Ephesians 3:20 immeasurably more than all we could ask or imagine. Our student involvement number literally quadrupled this year. And then just last month, we saw 100 students say yes to an invitation to follow Jesus. So I don't think I've ever witnessed revival, but I feel like maybe I have this year.
Yeah. And what I love is, as we've already mentioned, like this is just one little piece of that much bigger story of revival. And we're gonna get even more snapshots into the bigger story here. But for you, the events leading up to this night started much longer ago than just a year ago when you rejoined staff, or even when you were on staff the first time.
Yep.
Like this goes way back. That God's been working in your heart about reaching Greek students. Can you tell us like where this story kind of started for you?
Yes, totally. You say way back. It really was way back, like back in 1998. So I was actually a college student at IU myself from 1994 to 1998. I came into school what I call churched but clueless, had grown up going to church, but didn't really know what it meant to follow Jesus or have a relationship with him. I got to college, and probably like so many college students, I was just totally thrown out of my comfort zone, asking all the big life questions. Why am I here? What is my purpose in life? Joined a sorority to try and make this big campus feel a little smaller. And ironically, it was through my sorority that I found Jesus.
Wow. That's really, and so then you join the sorority. I would imagine sort of unexpectedly, maybe that's the place where Jesus really like steps in and meets you in a powerful place. Tell us just a little bit about like What was some of that transformation like for you in that space?
Yeah, totally. So there was a girl in my house, in my sorority house, who was leading a Bible study, and she invited me to come to the Bible study. And I had tried all the other things that college tells you are supposed to be the things you do in your college life, and it just was not fun. And I thought, when she invited me, maybe this is really what I have been looking for. So she invited me to come to the Bible study, but then she also invited me to come to the larger Greek IV organization that had been putting on, kind of sponsoring maybe this Bible study. InterVarsity had just started its ministry to Greek students back in the early 90s. So I'm super grateful that I got to be a part of that. Because it was really that ministry, Greek IV, that taught me what it looked like to follow Jesus. And I remember first getting involved in that Bible study, then getting involved with Greek IV. But it was when my staff worker, when I finally got to be discipled, that for the first time ever in my life, someone showed me how to study my Bible. And I remember taking this it was now what I know as an inductive Bible study method back to my sorority house and sitting down in the Delta Gamma study room and opening up my Bible to Romans 4 and just kind of using this outline and really just having this very Holy Spirit inspired moment where I knew that God wanted to know me, that he wanted me to know him, that I could know him through a more careful study of his word. And I was hooked after that. I went on to continue to study chapter by chapter, book by book over the next couple years of my time as a student with Greek IV there.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. I mean, and it sounds like just absolute life transformation,
totally.
which being a couple of staff with InterVarsity and our alumni listeners, that doesn't sound shocking.
Right.
But at the same time, you just love being reminded of those stories of this is, I grew up knowing about Jesus, but this is where I came to know Jesus. And that happens time and time again with our students. And for many of us as staff, that was our experience as well. But it sounds like it's not, knowing where you are now, that it's not just your life that was transformed by your time with Greek IV, that it was also your vision for broader transformation among Greek students. So tell us a little bit more about that growing vision as well.
Yeah, so I don't think right away I quite had any vision for Greek ministry or reaching Greeks. I remember feeling very, very passionate as I had been discipled, like I told you, that I wanted to be able to do that same thing for other students. But it wasn't really until a couple years later, the summer between my junior and senior year, 1997, I went up to Cedar campus, which sadly is no longer a part of InterVarsity, but still very much a huge part of my story. And there was an undergrad staff there. I still don't even remember who that undergrad staff was. But he knew I was Greek, and we just had this conversation at dinner where he said, "Hey, would you be interested ever in coming to our campus and talking about Greek ministry and how to reach Greeks?" And I just remember feeling very excited all of a sudden. And God used that excitement to kind of start stirring in me a little of that vision, maybe that you're talking about, and really just kind of thinking wait, is staff maybe something that you have for me, God? And so he really used that invitation from that undergrad staff. I never even ended up going to that campus. Like I said, I don't even remember who it was, but God used that question, that invitation to really stir something up in me. And that was, like I said, the beginning of that summer between my junior and senior year. So I just spent the rest of that summer really praying and asking God if this was something that he had for me in my future.
And I mean, it would seem that the answer to that prayer ended up being yes, that this is where I'm taking you. What did that process look like for you? The transition from like very little vision to like, wait, hold on a second, to a summer of prayer, and like what was happening in that space for you?
Yeah. I mean, remember too, I was still pretty new Christian, just been walking with Jesus for a couple of years. And I always just, I truly believe that God in his kindness meets us right where we are in whatever stage of maturity we're at. And I had just been praying all summer long. I had been doing an internship at a different city that summer. So I was attending a church that wasn't really, the church I had grown up in or anything. And I remember coming towards the end of that summer, and I didn't really feel like I had gotten my answer yet. And for whatever reason, right before going to church this one Sunday morning, I just prayed very specifically, God, would you show me this morning if you want me to come on staff with InterVarsity or not?
Wow.
And I don't know what possessed me to be that specific. Like I said, God in his kindness, he meets us where we are. And that summer, the pastor had been teaching through the book of Acts. And at the end of his sermon, he said, I've run out of time. I only have time to give one of my application points, but that application is, how do I know if God wants me to go into ministry or not?
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. I was like on high alert at that moment. I felt like the spotlight had been like on me, and I was like, he's talking to me. This is God speaking to me. But I continued to just listen to everything he said about how do I know? And everything that he said just felt like complete peace and confirmation from God that, yes, this is what I have for you. You can rest assured and walk in that assurance that this is the next step I have for you.
Man, that is amazing. There are times in my life when I feel uncomfortable sort of making those requests to God of like, okay, today, because I think in general I want to work on God's timeline.
Yep.
But it is interesting, those spaces that sometimes we just step in and say, God, what about today? Could today be the day that I get an answer for this thing that I've been seeking after? And I wonder how often God really is just waiting for us to be like, would you just like you would ask your parent for, can I have a little extra cash to go to the movies with my friends or something like that?
I've been asking all summer, maybe today, can I have it?
Could you give me an answer today?
Yes.
It is amazing that sort of the persistent, those prayers of persistence and still having like expectancy, even if it's not expectation necessarily, and saying like, man, God, I believe that maybe today could be the day. And then there it is that, if anything, maybe it was the Lord prompting you to pray that prayer just so that you would be aware for when the time came along.
Yes. Yeah. Because in those moments in the future, then when I would maybe doubt, it was so much easier to go back and remember, no, this was a very clear yes from the Lord.
Yes, absolutely. I love that you bring that up, because I feel like I keep being reminded in this season, remembering God's faithfulness in the past when we're in dry seasons, and saying like, I know I've heard God's voice. He has led me before. I feel like I'm not getting any direction right now, but I trust that he will lead me again, or is leading me in ways that I just don't recognize right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't forget to remember.
Yes, absolutely. Don't forget to remember. Yeah. That's awesome. Kristen, is then okay. So you receive this, what feels like very clear direction, and like, okay, this is my answer. Tell us a little bit about what your like early days on staff were like. What was that first season? 12 years is a lot of space to cover, so maybe we won't cover all of it. But like, tell us just a bit about what that first round on staff was like for you.
Yeah. So I was on staff, like I said at the beginning, for 12 years, but it's good to know that I was pretty quickly married and then mom right after I graduated from college. And so I was also pretty quickly part-time. My husband rewind a little bit. So Greek IV, like I said, back in the early 90s, it had just gotten started. Sure. So it was still just kind of a regional ministry back in those late 90s. And by the early 2000s, InterVarsity said, hey, this is growing. Let's make this national. And so my husband was invited to be the national director for the Greek ministry.
Wow.
And so So I remember in those 12 years kind of being a part of that team that was helping to really grow it from this regional ministry to a more national ministry, helping out in places like North Carolina and California. But really it was kind of just that part-time for 12 years that was my first stint on staff.
Okay. But throughout that whole time, I mean, did you feel like you continued to have a growing sense of like my calling, at least in this season of my calling, very much is to Greek students, to seeing the lives of Greek students transformed and this space renewed? And I mean, did you continue to feel like an affirmation of that portion of your calling during that time?
Am I allowed to say no?
Absolutely. Yes, please.
I actually don't know if I felt that true sense of calling and passion at that point in time. When we moved up to Madison, Wisconsin for my husband to take on that national director role, I was still 12 hours a week, and there's a Greek system there at UW. So I was able to serve part-time there. And I loved it, but I still don't think I knew myself well enough. I was in my early 20s, and I was just trying to focus on being mom. I felt a little bit sometimes like I was drowning, and so it didn't really feel like at that point in time I had this true sense of like, this is what I was made for, what God called me to. I know I enjoyed it. But that was about the extent of it, to be honest with you.
Sure. Oh man, knowing some of the direction that this story is going, that just makes this even more fascinating to me.
Okay, good.
That is so interesting to have what felt like this growing vision, this very clear invitation, and then this 12 years is not a short amount of time to do something.
Right.
even at 12 hours a week or whatever, like that, for a part-time role, to keep leaning in that space of like, this is fun, but I don't know if this is my thing.
Yeah.
That's a long time to stay committed to something like that. And to say like, wow, what was God's timing? What was happening in God's timing for all of this stuff is just so fascinating. But then this season does eventually come to a close. Yep. Like, can you tell us a little bit about what that transition then into the next season of life for you? Like what was happening in that space that you said that you were, that being a mom was very heavy on your mind. I wonder if that has anything to do with sort of the decision to like, I think I want to lean further into this part of my calling. But you tell the story, not me. I'm just, I'm grasping at straws here and wondering.
You're right on.
what happens for you there, and then what happens next? Yeah,
I know you're right on track there. So we had moved up to Madison. Like I said, my husband was the national director.
Okay.
And in 2010, our girls would have been 8 and 10 years old, and we decided to move back to Indiana. Just wanted to be closer to family, wanted to raise our girls back with family. Yeah. And it just felt like that was the right season where God had said, I have something else for you that's next. And my husband left the staff, and I left as well. Just nothing, big or bad or anything had happened. It just felt like this was the right season for somebody else to kind of take the reins and lead that ministry into its next season. And I really wanted to be able to focus on being a good mom, and I still did other part-time jobs as well. But that was really my first ministry, and my first priority was to our daughters.
Yes. So I would assume then at that time of your life, it sort of seemed like, okay, the chapter of being on staff with InterVarsity, that chapter is done, and we're moving on to the next. As alumni with InterVarsity, our time with InterVarsity is never done. But as far as like that version of my connection with InterVarsity, like that time has passed, and I'm moving into a very different season of life.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. My husband likes to say to our graduating seniors, you're not leaving InterVarsity, your role is just changing with InterVarsity. So
Absolutely. Oh, any other alumni listeners who are hearing that right now, be reminded of that exact thing.
Yes, please.
Yes, you are not done with InterVarsity, and we are all in this together forever.
Totally. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so then you're in this season of life. You're doing other part-time jobs, but like your primary ministry, your primary focus is like being a mom to your children, yep, and like leading your family in that way. And I would assume there's a lot of like fulfillment and joy and like, yeah. Well, let me ask it this way. Did you have a sense in that season that you didn't have in the previous one of like, you say your role with InterVarsity, that was like, I really enjoy doing this, but I'm not so sure that like this is my thing. When you were at home, did that feel more so like, I feel like here I am absolutely leaning into the thing that I am supposed to be doing right now?
I still don't know if I was thinking that way.
Okay. Okay.
I really kind of feel like that type of thinking didn't happen until later, and okay, I'd be happy to share that story with you. Probably it'll come up in a little bit of our further conversation. Okay.
Yeah.
I loved being mom, and I loved. I knew I still loved discipling people and helping. I loved helping young believers who had just kind of maybe prayed to receive Christ or made a decision to follow him. I was the one who wanted to come alongside them and follow up and say, okay, now let me take you under my wing and show you what this looks like, because I knew that's my story. Yes. No one had really taken me under their wing and showed me what it looked like. And when someone finally did that, to be able to see the life change and transformation that happened, I knew that I just always wanted to do that for other young believers as well. So I knew I had that in me. But it just kind of looked different with, different roles maybe that I would have in a church or something like that. It wasn't necessarily with, InterVarsity ministry at that point. I just knew that I loved discipling, and I was leading a Bible study in my home that friends were inviting their friends to come to, and just introducing people to how to get into God's word. So I just knew I loved that. I don't know if I necessarily would say that was what I felt like God had made me to do, or a calling that he had given me per se.
Yeah, but maybe it's clear now looking back on those places of like, there are these recurring themes.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I wonder how often that's the case for many of us. Is like, if I were to pause and look back, I can see some of these consistent themes running through very different contexts in my life. But these are the places that God has gifted me and given me passions. And even if the specific context isn't necessarily like, oh, these are my people, it's more like I'm living into the giftings that God has given me, and that's the thing that I'm really excited about wherever I am. Yes,
very much. It was kind of just like now, like you said, looking back, it was like breadcrumbs that I feel like in these last really just probably year or two, where I just feel like, okay, I get it. I know that this is what God has made me this is what he's made me passionate about, and really feeling like I'm living into that calling and firing on all cylinders, so to speak.
Yeah. That's awesome. Those are such life-giving moments to have of sort of realizing some of those things about yourself. And it's just amazing the seasons of life where we find those. You kind of think like, as I'm a teenager, as I'm in college, like that's where I figure that stuff out. And it's like, I've had way more revelations about who I am and the way God has made me long after college.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Like those are the places where I'm like, wow, I didn't really realize this about myself, but this is true. And I can see it in all these different places.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. That's so awesome. I love the stories of self-discovery and discovering the way that God has made you more and more in these different seasons, different contexts.
Too. Yes.
So great. So then, Kristen, you're in this season of doing things other than being on staff with InterVarsity. You're at home. You're having people into your home, teaching other people how to study the Bible, taking them under your wing, as you said. And then 2020 hits.
How many stories start now with, and then 2020 hits?
I know. Well, let's just add another to the pile.
Yes.
2020 was a significant year for all of us, like worldwide, all of us, in a way that there's very few other places that we can say this was meaningful to the entire world. 2020 was one of those times. It was significant for all of us, but it was significant for you in a specific way. Why is that year important for this story?
Yeah, so our daughter, we have two. Both of them went to IU.
Okay.
And the younger one, sadly, 2020 was her senior year of high school / freshman year of college. Yeah.
Wow.
And remember, our girls had really grown up with Greek Ivy. They danced as little kids at the Greek conference dance party, and they'd helped volunteer at registration. And so they were familiar with the ministry. And so our younger daughter, when she got to IU, she really wanted to join a sorority and be a part of Greek IV. Wow. But unfortunately, I don't know how any business or ministry survived 2020.
Seriously.
And so that was really the case of what was kind of happening with IU Greek IV as well. There had also been some staff transition right around that time. And so the ministry was just kind of in a low place, like, things ebb and flow. And it was in one of those spots where Abby was sharing stories with us of what was happening with Greek IV at IU. And my husband and I, just having had such great memories ourselves and being transformed by this ministry ourselves, we were so sad. And we love IU. We love IU Greeks specifically.
Yeah.
And so it felt a little bit like just Nehemiah 1, where, Nehemiah hears these stories of the broken down walls in his beloved city. And he's just moved to tears and prayer. And that was a little bit how it felt as we were kind of hearing these stories of, just what was happening, because we wanted this for her and we wanted this for IU to be this thriving ministry. And it really just kind of wasn't at that point in time.
Wow. Yeah. To think back on those places that have had such significance in your history, and really that has played a huge role in informing the ways that you're living out your calling in that season of life, to look at that and say, oh, the walls are broken down.
Yeah.
What do we do here? And that was one of your, that many of us identified with that sort of sense in 2020 in one way or another, but that was one of them that really stood out for you, of like, wow, this is a place that has come to a really difficult situation, and just the mournful response to that.
Yep.
So then there's a season that follows that time of, I assume, sort of wrestling with those realities. And let me know if I'm jumping over anything that's an important part of the story here. But I know that then in 2023, there's an interesting call.
Yeah. Yes. Yep.
Tell us what we need to know that gets us to that call.
Yeah. There wasn't really much significant that happened in between the stories of the broken down walls and the 2023 call. So the staff who was at IU, she decided to leave. I think it was maybe July-ish, and Lauren McDonough, who is the regional Greek coordinator for Indiana and Illinois, she gave me and Andy a call, and she said, hey, we got this group of students at IU and we don't have a staff. Would you be interested in coming and volunteering? And she was really going to try and just piece something together, I think. Okay. She's very confident, and it never occurred to me, or she never let on that she was like nervous or scared. I've heard since then that she was like, I had no idea what we were going to do. Paul Birch was still there, like I've mentioned him. And so between Paul and Lauren and me and Andy, we were just going to kind of try and like lead this small group of students. And so before we said yes to this invitation to come back and volunteer, we asked our daughter, Abby, we're like, hey, we've been invited to come back and volunteer. Are you okay with the fact that essentially your parents might be like your staff. And, and God bless her. She was like, yes, please come. This moment has actually brought me to tears several times, where I just think about the work that she was. I guess that's maybe the significant thing that was happening between 2020 and 2023 is Abby was just working really hard as kind of one of the lone student leaders to keep that ministry going and to try and help see it thrive. And so when we said, "Hey, are you okay if we come back?" She was like, "Yes, please come."
Wow.
We need help. And so yeah, that was the call in 2023 that kind of changed everything. We really were just going to kind of come and, disciple a few leaders. That was the point of our volunteer role.
Yeah. Wow. I have to, as a fellow parent, I have to pause for a moment here and just think about that.
Sure.
And I'll try to say this without coming to full tears.
Yeah.
But I just have to imagine that the thought of your own kid. I mean, just the history that's happening here of this place where your life was transformed, and now your youngest child is there in the midst of a really difficult, such a really difficult season. And that you're seeing her grow and thrive and follow Jesus and say yes to him in this really challenging space, and almost like continue carrying the torch of something that you had carried, and then to be invited back into it by her. How often do we ask our kids if we can help them with something? They're like, "No, please."
Right? Yes.
Let me do this.
Yes.
And man, to have your kids say, "Yes, would you please come be a part of this with us?" And to have it be something about being a part of ushering God's kingdom in my word, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Man, I can't imagine the joy that there would be being asked by my own kid.
I know.
To come do something like that with them. Wow.
Yeah, get it. That's exactly the reason why that story just brings me to tears, to be able to partner with her and watch God move and work in her. There's no greater joy, right?
Yeah. Wow. And then bonus, you get to be a part of seeing other people's lives transformed too. Holy cow.
I know. It's like, God is so good.
Yes. Oh my word. I love that so much. But you've already mentioned that you are officially on staff at this point. So somewhere along the way, there is another big transition that happens, that you go from volunteering to full-time staff. And so I'm sort of going to put side by side two questions together here. What are the transitions that are happening in you that are bringing you to full-time staff? And what are the things that are starting to happen on campus that are steering the ship towards this big event? We mentioned this big event early on, and we've sort of left it hanging there for people, and we're making our way back to it. What are the changes for you and on campus that are happening that are starting to turn the ship towards something like this being possible?
Yeah. So I'm going to go back a little bit and answer that question you had kind of been asking before about,
sure.
Did you have a sense that maybe this is what, God had been calling you to? And I had been in that season when Lauren invited us to come back and volunteer. I had been serving before that, even from 2019 to 2022 as a discipleship pastor at a church. And so I had gone back into vocational ministry for those 3 years. And I got to lead this team of 10 people that built a discipleship pathway at this huge mega church that I'm so proud to say is still growing and bearing fruit there today. And
wow.
I think God taught me a lot about myself and my giftings and my passions and my skill set, because by this point in time, I had become, I call it empty nester stage 1, when the girls go to college. Empty nester stage 2 is when they graduate from college, and then you're really they don't even come home in the summer anymore.
Oh, no.
So empty nester stage 1. And I had left that job, and I was then just doing this job as a chief of staff at a healthcare consulting company, and feeling very unfulfilled, feeling like I just was not making a difference in the world, feeling like I was not using any of my giftings and passions. And so when Lauren asked us to come back and volunteer, like I said, that was a no-brainer. But after the fall semester, what was kind of interesting was my husband and I both, I don't know if you do much with StrengthsFinder, John.
I have a team member, actually my supervisor, who is very into
that. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Well, my husband and I both have the command strength in our top 5. And so after the fall of volunteering, we were kind of like, there's 4 of us who are kind of in charge here. And when there's 4 people in charge, it means no one's in charge. And so we had just said to Paul and to Lauren, and God bless them, we said, is it okay if we just kind of take the reins here and lead this thing as volunteers? And they were like, yes, please. Like, we're just used to volunteers that like make cookies, not asked to take over the leadership of a ministry.
Yeah.
So we got to really just kind of start to steer that ship, and to use your terminology a little bit, that spring semester. And then in February, we took like 20 students to Greek conference. And we had, when we walked into the ministry, and I'm backtracking again, sorry, in 2023, there were 4 very struggling chapter ministries. And by the end of that spring, there were 8 pretty healthy chapter ministries. We had started to have some weekly gatherings that were gaining some momentum, seeing maybe like 20 to 30 students at them. And God just used that season to call me back full time. And I was like, okay, wait, are you okay going back to, the application process and the fundraising? And I was like, yes, I was totally good with all of that. And I loved every second of it. That fundraising and that application season, there was nothing about it that I didn't enjoy. So that's once again, just totally like God's hand on me and calling me back to staff. So I actually think I might have forgotten what your question was. I've probably gone so off track here.
No, this is great. This is great. You are taking us exactly where I'm hoping for, because you've actually taken us up to like essentially up to the end of your year of volunteering in 2023 into 2024. And then that takes us into like school year, or, summer and school year of 24-25, our current, the current school year that's wrapping up now.
Yes.
So, I mean, tell us now here. Now we've taxied, we're on the runway, and so let's get up to speed, moving in the direction of the big event that happened in the last few months. Like, what is happening that is leading up to that being possible?
Yeah. So let me push pause here and just tell you a quick thing about Greek ministry and IU, Greek system in particular. So the Greek system at IU is huge. That's really important to know. It's like 8,000 Greek students.
Oh my gosh.
There's 40,000 undergrads. So that's 20% of the undergrad. Yeah. So it's pretty big. There's 4 councils, and there are 50 plus houses or chapters. I'll apologize right now because I kind of go back and forth calling it's the same thing, a chapter or a house. And the vision of Greek IV is that every Greek would be one friend away from knowing Jesus.
Wow.
And the strategy for how we reach that vision is by starting house Bible studies or chapter ministries in every single fraternity and sorority on campus that are led by the men and women in those fraternities and sororities. And so really just being able to cast that vision with the leaders and say like, hey, this is where we're going and this is how we're going to get there. They really started to catch that vision and to buy into it. We use terminology like red house, yellow house, green house. And red houses, as you can imagine, are houses where we have no ministry. Greenhouses are houses where we have a chapter Bible study or chapter ministry going. And so our student leaders just started in the fall. I'll kind of backtrack a little bit then. We started then with 8 chapter ministries. That's where I told you we had kind of left off in the spring. And this core group of maybe like 20 to 30 that were coming weekly. On our annual field report, I think that the total number of students who had attended something half the time was about 100. So that's where we ended with the end of the 2023-24 school year. So then when we came back in the fall, we had those 8 ministries, and we just started casting that vision. I really wanted to just model our ministry after how Jesus did things. And so in order to start those chapter ministries, you need to find your 12, right? You need to find your 12 disciples. So we were looking for more of those leaders. We were looking for Greek students who actually had maybe some kind of history or background with Jesus or church, who might be excited about this vision and getting a Bible study going. And God just moved. I mean, we started having those weekly gatherings of, hey, come one, come all, tell your friends. They started inviting their friends. We really did gear it towards leaders, and they would come and they would say, oh, we start Bible studies in our houses. Yeah, I'll start a Bible study. And so we grew that fall from 8 chapter ministries to 18, with like 5 more waiting to get started. And because the fall was basically over, so we're like, just hold off. We'll get you started in the spring. So to go from 8 to 18 in one semester was just really crazy.
That's unbelievable. I mean, we're talking about like a school year of unprecedented experiences.
Yes.
This is why we've said at a few different points, like the event that we're angling towards in this story is phenomenal, but it is not the one-off kind of thing that's been happening. This is just like this is one moment in a string of moments that are just like, holy cow, God is doing something in this space. And that's phenomenal. And I know that in the conversations you and I have had, that somewhere along the way you start like sort of a monthly gathering, or you're continuing to lean into a more specific monthly gathering or something like that. That has been an important part of the process too, right?
Yeah. So that was actually a really fun part of the fall. So in October, God had totally blessed me with these 5 great leaders. So I had this leadership team of 5 students. We met weekly, and we had gotten together in August for a couple of days to just really plan and set goals. And in October, we had been having these weekly gatherings. But every month, those gatherings, we would kind of leave our room that we met in the student union building, and we would go meet in a fraternity or a sorority house. So in October, we gathered together at one of these fraternities, and 60 students showed up to this meeting in October. We ran out of chairs, which was, unbeknownst to me, a sign of things to come, running out of chairs. Students were sitting on the floor at this fraternity house, which I would never advise anyone to do. There was standing room only. And it was after that evening that I just started to sense God saying something along the lines of, pay attention. I've got something. I didn't know what it was, but I was like, I'm here for it, God. I'm listening. Like, just share with me. I'm ready to go. Awesome. And remember this now, I'm in stage 2. Empty nester stage 2. So I got nothing but time to pray and strategize and think. And so the next leadership team meeting, I gathered our leaders together and I said, hey, we've been, it's been 2 months since we did our planning session in August. Let's do a big right, wrong, missing, confused, and just make sure that we feel like we're still on the right track moving forward. And they really dug in and they rolled up their sleeves. And after that meeting, it became pretty clear that the one thing that we were missing, that was glaring to all of us, was we had all of these new chapter ministry leaders now, and they didn't even know each other. And if we really were going to do things like Jesus did them, we needed a space where we could really pour into what I was considering our 12. We really needed a place where they could have community and fellowship and be around other like-minded people, and we could train them. If chapter ministries are really our bread and butter, we needed to train our leaders how to lead them well. And we just didn't have that space for just our chapter ministry leaders. So we left that meeting just knowing, okay, this is kind of what's missing. And I said, let's just pray. And if you've got ideas, we'll come back next week and we'll revisit this conversation. So we came back the next week, we revisited, I had kind of come up with some ideas for how we might fix this missing piece in our ministry. They had come up with some ideas themselves. We had, I think, about 7 ideas. And long story short, I was praying collectively with them. I was giving them time to pray individually. And then we'd take a vote at the end of that second week. And it was anonymous. And we were all over the board. Like no one agreed on what we should do. Okay. And so I was like, okay, we're not ready to move forward with anything yet. Come back next week, keep praying, keep strategizing. So came back the third week in this decision and kind of discernment making process. And we prayed again together. We kind of narrowed some things down. And as we were praying, I had a sense that people were really, it just felt, I don't know, quieter or something. And by the end of it, we took a vote and everyone had agreed that this is how we need to change our strategy. And honestly, John, it didn't make a ton of sense because like Paul, remember, he was there through all the lean years and he's been on staff for 40 years. And even he was kind of like, why are we changing things? Things are going really well, Yeah. But we all just had this sense that this is what God was leading us to. And we were all just very unanimously excited to move forward with this. So at the end of December, our very last kind of weekly gathering, I just gathered our chapter ministry leaders, which by this point in time, because even though we had 18 chapter ministries, some of them are co-led. So we had like 40 to 50 chapter ministry leaders. Okay. And I gathered them together and I just kind of painted this vision for where we wanted to head for the next semester. And we really just wanted them to know that we saw them as our 12, that we wanted to see what God did when he was first building his early church happen in the Greek system at IU. But the way that was going to happen was through the chapter ministries, because we weren't interested in just making some big weekly Greek gathering that hundreds of students came to. We were in this to make disciples. We were in this to build a disciple making movement, not just put on a big event. And chapter ministries was the way that we were going to make disciples and felt that was the most effective way. So we came up with this new strategy of weekly chapter ministry leader gatherings, but then once a month, we would kind of break out of that mold and go meet in a fraternity or sorority and do a big all Greek gathering where they could invite their brothers and sisters to come. And really the point of that was to be a little mini catalytic event so that these guys and girls who were kind of checking things out, what we kind of call Joe and Jane Greek. They're not out looking for other Christian things to get involved in, but they've got enough curiosity that they're willing to come. So we would have those monthly to serve as kind of something to be like, oh, wow, look what God's doing, and get them excited about attending their chapter ministries. So that was kind of a long story to say, like, that was what happened in October when we just had this, Holy Spirit kind of moment of like, I've got something new for you. And this is how we decided to change up our strategy for the spring semester. Yes.
Which clearly sets you off on a really great trajectory here. That like you come back from winter break, from Christmas break, and you lean into this regular kind of the weekly gatherings with people, and then the monthly all Greek gatherings, and those just like sort of just start taking off.
Yes, totally crazy.
Yeah. So then that's, you have what, like a January, February, March gatherings?
So we didn't do a January one. Okay. We did February, March, and April. So we were only going to have 3 of them.
Just 3 of them.
Yes.
And April, the April gathering that's the one that brings us to the story that's brought us all together here. Yeah. And we're about to tell that story in more depth here. Everybody's just like, I feel I continue like leaning over the top of my microphone as you're sharing this. If people are watching on YouTube, they can see me slowly like getting closer to the screen, and then I have to sit back because I'm just like, oh my gosh, here we go, we're getting closer. Before you tell that story, though, let's just introduce one moment of drama here, because I know that there's something that just like goes wrong right before this April gathering. Tell us that story, and then we'll get to the moment that we've been waiting for.
Oh yes, it wouldn't be complete without that moment of drama.
Exactly.
So just to let you know, the February All Greek gathering, we had no idea what to expect. It was our first one. We were meeting in a sorority house, and we're kind of asking, what's your capacity to hold us? And our All Greek gathering coordinator, Abby, she had said, how many people are you expecting? And I was like, 75, maybe 100. And my husband was like, that's probably a little much. But we were trying to figure out like space. And 110 students showed up. Like literally, we were sitting on the stairs that go down into the living room of the sorority house. And guys were bringing in dining room chairs from the next room to have more seating. So when we got to the March All Greek gathering, we set up 100 chairs. 180 students showed up.
What?
Yeah. So these All Greek gatherings, like you said, they had been just growing like crazy. So Paul was the one, Andy and Paul and I had been sharing the teaching at these All Greeks. And so Paul was up in April for our April All Greek gathering.
Okay.
And he had said to me, Kristen, I just have this sense that the students need to hear the gospel and have a chance to respond to it. And I was like, you are absolutely right. Like of all of the students, these 180, what would we say? Like there's probably at least 50 of them that aren't really followers of Jesus. So let's give them an opportunity. Yeah. So we shared that with our leadership team. We shared that with our chapter ministry leaders. We kind of advertised it as such, like, hey, we'd been teaching them how to share their faith, but here's an easy way. You can just bring your brothers and sisters and Paul will do it for you. Yeah. And we had response cards made up where we just agonized over the wording of how we were going to do that, because it seems like those moments where you make an invitation to follow Jesus for whatever reason, there's just so much confusion that seems to pop up. So we agonized over the wording. And so back to then the drama. We were meeting at a sorority. I have two social media girls who are phenomenal.
Nice.
We'd already advertised it on our social media where we were going to have it. These gatherings happen the first Tuesday of every month, and the Monday before, the leader of the sorority that's supposed to host us calls me in just tears, so upset. And I was like, what's wrong? I could barely understand her. And she said, the house board told us we can't meet here because we're too big and we're a fire hazard.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, that's all right. There's 50 other chapters. We'll find one. Don't worry, just trying to put her at ease. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, at this late stage, we need a fraternity because they don't have quite the stringent rules that the sororities do. And it's not even quite 9 o'clock in the morning yet. So I text our Fiji leader, Nick, miracle that he's even awake before 9 a.m. And I'm like, Nick, how would you like to host 180 Greek students at Fiji tomorrow? And he's like, check in with my chapter president now. I'll get right back to you. And within a half an hour, we had a new location. Our social media girls had made a new graphic. And what that did was it actually served to only fire our leaders up more because they really felt like this was kind of an enemy ploy. Like he knew what was going to happen. And so all it did was just serve to make more invites. And the girl who was told that she couldn't host, her sorority sisters rallied around her and she brought 14 girls to that gathering in April at Fiji. And so it was one of, and I even had said to Nick, I was like, hey, do you have enough chairs for us? We're going to take the tables out. We've learned enough. And he's like, yeah, we got plenty of chairs. we set up 130 chairs. And I was like, where's the rest of the chairs? And he's like, I don't know what happens. Like it's a fraternity house. So, so once again, we got standing room only because 190 students showed up to this April All Greek gathering. They're standing, they're sitting on tables. Yeah. So there was the drama for you.
That's amazing. I love that, and just the fact that it was not a loss of spirit, so that it was
it was only served to fire it up. Yeah.
Let's dig in and make this happen. Okay, so then here we are, 190 students are showing up to this secondary space that they only found out about, 36 hours before it's going to happen.
Yep.
And so, all right. What is it that happens at this event? Just take the story, take us through the story that we've been waiting for.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, it's hard to describe or measure a move of God, right? And so I'll just do my best. Paul had decided that he was going to teach from Ecclesiastes 2. Which is, I know, but it's Solomon basically could have been an IU Greek if he would have lived in our time. Here he is chasing success, chasing women, chasing food and pleasure and all the things that our Greek students also chase after for satisfaction and pleasure. And we really titled Talk the Search for Satisfaction. And he talked about Jesus as our bread of life and our living water, the one true thing that will never disappoint, that will be the only thing that truly satisfies. And he gave an invitation for anyone who had never made a decision before in their life to follow Jesus. And he made it pretty clear, and he also didn't make it easy. We didn't try and tug on people's emotions too much or be manipulative.
Sure. Yeah.
He talked about the cost, and he said, you don't even have to fill out this card. It's just there for you if you want to make a decision tonight and kind of draw a line in the sand. And we asked for their names and their phone numbers on this card too. And so that's what it didn't feel like this big, angels singing moment or anything like that. And then we had great student leaders who just went around and they gathered the cards. And like we've done at all of our other All Greek gatherings, we had a student testimony, and he was phenomenal. Tate, he shared about his own searching in all the wrong places until he finally found true satisfaction in Jesus. And then we did 2 chapter ministry leader spotlights. And at the end, the leaders gave me all the cards, and students are leaving, and we're packing up and putting the room back in order. And I'm holding these 190 cards and thinking to myself, I just wondered if anyone even checked this box,
Wow.
And
okay. So in the moment as it's happening, it didn't even seem like some big
No.
Okay. I see here. I have not heard the ins and outs of the story, and here I thought it was in the space you just see this massive response.
No.
You have a very quiet moment that happens here.
Yeah, we had, like I said, we had kind of agonized over how to do it. Should we have students stand up? Do you have them close their eyes and raise their hands? But like I said, we just really wanted it to be a moment where they could do something in private quietly, but then give us their name and number so that we could follow up with them.
Yeah.
In hindsight, maybe I would go back and do some things differently or word something differently. I don't know. Like I said, it's just hard to know. But I started to take a look at those cards, just peeking at them as Paul is packing up his sound equipment. And the first 3 I look at had all checked that first box. And I was like, oh my gosh, they responded, Paul. And he was like, okay, well, when you get home, will you just let me know as soon as possible? So yeah, I Zoomed home. It's I don't live there on campus, so I commute. So it was those cards were kind of burning a hole in my bag.
Absolutely.
And Andy had been there. So I was like, all right, I want you to count these cards. And then I always like to go through and count who all was there at the All Greek gatherings. And so he just starts counting them, and he looks up and he says, 111 students. Check the box. that they wanted to follow Jesus and trust him as their Lord and Savior.
Goodness.
And I was like, are you kidding me? So that led us to, we have a chapter ministry leader group me that I just love, because since they've gotten to know each other, they feel like a family, and they were like, how many check the box to follow Jesus? Like, they were so excited to know. And,
that's awesome.
And so I was able to report to them, and they were like, what? I was thinking this is one of those things that Paul and Andy and I would be able to follow up with everyone who checked that box. But I was pretty off base with that.
Yeah. This is, I mean, you talk about like a nets breaking situation. You have been experiencing like net after net being broken over the course of these last couple of semesters. And this moment is another one of those. And I know, like this creates logistical challenges for you all, which, that'd be a whole nother story in and of itself, talking about how did you do this? How did you follow up with these people as best as you could? I don't think we'll go there necessarily for our time here, but I wonder, like, I'll just say it outright. Like, having been in chapter ministry as well on campus, like, that there's a certain amount of nuance, and you've asked this question already of like, what do people mean? Like, what's going on in their heads when they're checking yes in this box? Like, what did that actually mean for them?
Yep.
And that we trust that they have been met by the Spirit of God, and that he is moving them towards himself one way or another. But that maybe not every yes meant the same thing necessarily to somebody, but that they were saying yes to something in that space. So knowing that that's the reality of like, okay, 111 people responded. How many people are in the process of like full life transformation here? Like, can you just give us some stories about what is the fruit that you've been seeing? Knowing that so much of it is actually really hard to measure in truth and in reality.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'll tell you a couple of just quick stories. So, two of the guys who did check that they wanted to receive and follow Jesus were two of our guys who had just recently kind of come out of nowhere. It was one of our red houses, and they had heard about Greek IV through friends, and they wanted to start a Bible study in their fraternity house. Like, this is where things started going in the spring, John. I was like getting random texts from people I didn't know who were like, we want to start a Bible study. And I'm like, great, do you want to talk with me and meet with me first? And I can tell you about Greek IV. So these two guys had wanted to start a Bible study. And when I met with them, I was like, I'm not sure that you're even a Christian. But that's all right. Listen, just open up the scriptures, discuss what you see about Jesus. That's totally fine to do. And then I handed them over to Andy, because Andy and Paul kind of split the discipleship of our men leaders. Okay. And then I disciple all the women leaders. And so I said, Andy, these two guys are starting a Bible study in their fraternity. I'm not sure they're following Jesus or not, but you can discuss that with them. So right. they checked that box, and so it just gave Andy the opportunity when he met with them the next week to say, hey, we had a great night, at Fiji last week, and you guys tell me about this. And so long story short, in that moment, he got to pray with both of them to receive Christ, and they were fired up afterwards. And one of them is coming to summer retreat next week, and I just was so. And then another quick story. We had so many students that came to know Jesus through their chapter ministry this year, which was phenomenal. One of those, actually both, there's one girl and one guy that I'm thinking of in particular. I loved that on their response card, they wrote, I've already made this decision, or I'm already following Jesus. Yeah. And to just see that assurance that they have, and be able to kind of voice that and know where they stand with him was those were just a couple of stories that really warmed my heart. And at the end of the year, we had to turn in our annual field report by April 30th. We ended up reporting 67 decisions for Jesus after all of our follow-up. But even after I turned that AFR in, John, I had 2 guys say, "Oh, hey, we need to add somebody else. I just had coffee with somebody else this morning who said they want to recommit their life to Jesus." So, I mean, it's just continuing. The fruit is just continuing to be born.
That is so amazing. So then, I mean, I have to ask you a very obvious question then, Kristen, but I want to ask because I want to hear you. I just want to hear you answer it.
Yeah.
Is it accurate to say that you get to partner with God in his world-changing work through Greek InterVarsity at IU?
Oh my gosh. This is another moment where I will cry. God knew what he was going to do and what he wanted to do at IU and the Greek system this year. And it feels like such a gift that he pointed at me and he said, I want you to go.
Yeah.
And knowing, back to those Clifton strengths and knowing the ways that he has wired me and gifted me, I feel like he was even saying to me, like, come on, you're going to have so much fun. Like, you're going to love this. And I have been having the time of my life. And I am just loving partnering with him. And like you said, it feels like a complete gift.
Yes. Wow. I love that so much, Kristen. And I'm thinking back even to, when you were a student, that even then, God knew. He knew what was going to be happening in April of this year. And he's like, Kristen, you have no clue what I am inviting you to do. You have no idea, but it's coming. Will you say yes now? Because down the road, holy cow, you're going to be so psyched that you said yes.
Yeah. Gosh, I'm kind of glad that he doesn't give us that whole big picture at the beginning, but man, is that just really incredible to think about.
Thanks for tuning in, alumni. If you know someone who would enjoy the InterVarsity World Changers podcast, please be sure to share the episode with them. You can also support the podcast by leaving a rating and a review or by visiting our donation page in the show notes. InterVarsity World Changers is brought to you by the InterVarsity Alumni Relations Team, hosted and produced by John Steele, production assistance by Mike Centera, and edited by Caleb Leppert. Our theme song is Crazy by InterVarsity alumnus Andy Mineo. Go change that world, alumni.